Good evening. Welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. Happy New Year for those of us who are joining for the first time. My name is Irina Zuckerman, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today is Dr. Esmira Jafarova. She is the deputy director and board member of the Air Center in Azerbaijan. We are here to discuss a very interesting topic that's been ongoing for days and now even weeks, which is the issue of illegal mining and eco-terrorism in the liberated territories in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan won a 44-day war over 2 years ago now. It liberated various territories in the Karabakh that were occupied by Armenia for approximately 30 years. Since then, there's been ongoing tensions with Armenians. There's been controversy over the role of the Russian peacekeepers enforcing the trilateral agreement, and all of that is going on in the course of peace talks, negotiations to finalize the terms of the agreement. We'll talk about all of that. Now, Air Center is the center of analysis of international relations, and it focuses a lot on these geopolitical topics. The reason it's relevant today is, first of all, there's a question about who is really behind these ongoing, continuing provocations and tensions. Is it just Armenia? Is Russia or other countries or another country also involved? Who benefits from it? And is it going to turn into a major confrontation once again? And we've seen in September there was a major operation, and there was a very violent outcome. And the other issue is, of course, disinformation. We've seen very one-sided coverage of this topic in the campaign, in print media, in the United States and in Europe. And there's been allegations that Azerbaijan is supposedly closing roads and cutting off gas, and preventing Armenians from going from Karabakh to Armenia. Is that really true? All of that we're going to discuss today. Dr. Jafarova, welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report. Thank you for joining us. And just tell us a little bit more about your background by way of introduction to our audience.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you very much for having me and opening this very important topic for discussion. And as you rightly noted, it's really important that Azerbaijani perspective also gets out there and people get the chance to hear to Azerbaijani perspective of the issues, because as you mentioned again, there's lots of misinformation about what's happening currently around the Lachin road and why it is happening. That's also a very, very important question. So all those issues I'm ready to discuss with you today. Yes, Air Center has been established in 2019 in February, and we are responsibly basically dealing with the foreign policy and security related issues. And obviously, as you also said, issues related to geopolitics, regional and international geopolitical issues. And of course, this current issue is very, very the focus of our attention currently as well. And we are also doing our best to reach out there and put the word. But beyond that, of course, Air Center is a policy think tank. And of course, we are mostly responsible for preparing relevant documents, policy recommendations, as well as analytical products that we put out there. And those people who would like to see our work, they can go to our website. It's aircenter.az. So they can find lots of information about what we do and how we do it and our products there as well. So that's that. And if you would like me to continue speaking about our center and myself, I don't know if I spoke about myself.
No, you haven't. Please tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay, I'm a former diplomat, but they say there is no former diplomat. But I spent 16 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I worked 2 embassies. And I also worked in the Ministry of Energy as an advisor to Alba Minister of Energy. And after working there, I came here to Air Center, and I've been with the center for about 3 years. So as you see, I have a rather mixed background, lots of places where I have been, which actually gives me, I would say, privilege to have this, let's say, experience and have knowledge of different, let's say, areas. And I'm also a former teacher. I've been teaching also in ADA University, issues related, topics related to foreign policy, diplomacy, international relations theories. So you see lots of mixed issues that I have been dealing with. I did my PhD in the University of Vienna in Austria, and I did my postdoctoral in the Columbia University. So, well, that's that. I don't want to take much time speaking about myself. So that's all I can say about myself.
So for the last 2 years, basically, most people don't really know what's going on. They hear occasional bits and pieces about outbursts of violence on the borders and various confrontations and controversies, but there's no overview of what happened for 2 years, no cohesive understanding. So what has there been, before we get into today's events, what has been the situation like after the liberation of Karabakh territories?
Well, after the liberation of Karabakh territories, Azerbaijan has a rather big agenda. And there are a number of issues, actually, that I would like to highlight here. First of all, there is this issue of signing a peace treaty, peace process with Armenia, signing of a peace treaty. And the second issue, which Azerbaijan was trying to actively promote, and also that were discussed very actively with Armenia, was also humanitarian issues in the humanitarian cluster. Another issue was related to opening of communications of all the connections according to the trilateral agreement, and also issues related to landmines and security related issues. This is also very, very important. That is also very, let's say, taking time consuming, energy consuming, and as well as the resource consuming. And well, those issues that currently were focused in our conversation, in our, let's say, negotiations with Armenia, mostly relate to peace process, signing of peace treaty, humanitarian issues, opening of all communications, obviously implementation of all commitments that were taken under the November Declaration of 2020. When it comes to Azerbaijan's own agenda, because we're also having our own agenda after the liberation of our territories, and that is mostly related to reconstruction of our lands and making those lands habitable, because the territories were razed to ground and nothing sound is left from those territories. Only in Aghdam, they call it Hiroshima of the Caucasus, because the city of Aghdam, which once was a thriving city, now is absolutely devastated. And that's not the only city which is devastated. All cities all places that were liberated, they're all devastated, they're all razed to ground. Nothing is left. So we're starting from scratch to rebuild those territories. And rebuilding those territories also takes lots of, obviously, financial resources, human resources, material resources. And it's a huge burden on the government. But every year, government allocates a specific amount of money for these purposes. Like last year and this year, this amount was around 1.3, 1.5 billion US dollars only for reconstruction purposes. But the problem with reconstruction is that it goes hand in hand with the landmine issues, landmine clearance. And also the problem with landmine clearance is that the liberated Azerbaijani territories are currently considered to be one of the most heavily contaminated territories with landmines. Only in Aghdam, it was reported that 97,000 landmines were found in one city. And the same goes to all territories that were liberated. And the problem with landmines is that we don't have the clear-cut and exact maps of those landmines that were planted there by Armenia. And those maps that we received from them with the facilitation of the international actors, Russian Federation, also the United States, the European Union, also Georgia, at some point, at different phases, let's say, of the negotiation process, with the facilitation of these actors. those maps that were received from Armenia, they were only 25% accurate. So, you know, you can imagine it's not really helpful. And another issue was the landmines that when we gave an extension to Armenia to liberate Lachin, for instance, in 2020, when the November Declaration was signed, they had to leave Lachin by the 1st of December. And they also had to liberate Kalbajar. They also had to liberate the places that were still under Armenian occupation. But when they left those territories, they couldn't make it. And we gave extension, for example, to liberate Kalbajar from 15th of November to 25th of November. So they used that extension to burn our houses, burn our trees, to devastate the ecosystem and plant more landmines. And the problem with Lachin also, I mentioned Lachin earlier, is that the control of the Lachin city itself came to Azerbaijan, fully under Azerbaijan's control, only this summer. Before that, full control of the Lachin city itself was not in Azerbaijan's hands. And there were two villages around Lachin, Zabukh and Sus, where also Armenian inhabitants were living. They were brought there from the Middle East, from other countries in the Middle East. They were not really original citizens of those places. They were brought there by Armenian government to inhabit those places, to resettle those places. It was, of course, illegal because you can't engage in the resettlement activities of those places, of the territories that are under occupation. This is illegal under international law. And those places, when, say, the villages of Sus and Zabuk and Lachin city itself, when fully came to under Azerbaijani control in August this year, because according to Trilateral Declaration of November 2020, Lachin city was controlled yet by the Russian peacekeeping forces, and the main road that were uniting Armenia proper with the Armenians in Karabakh was passing through the Lachin city itself. But according to Trilateral Declaration, within 3 years after the declaration is signed, this road that is uniting Lachin, that is uniting Armenia proper with Karabakh and passing through the Lachin the city itself, will come under Azerbaijani control, and they will be parallel roads to that particular road. And Azerbaijan built the parallel road and took the control over the road that was going through Lachin city. So it might be a bit complicated, but I'm trying to explain what happened. When Armenians were leaving Lachin city, because there was already a parallel alternative road that would unite Armenia with Karabakh Armenians, they planted more landmines into those territories that were leaving. Only in Lachin city, after Armenian population left, they found 1,400 more landmines that they planted in Lachin, that they brought from Armenia proper, and after the war was over, definitely. And most of those landmines we found were actually produced in Armenia. So they are just littering our territories with the landmine production, landmines that they produce in their own country, homegrown landmines. So the problem with landmine contamination is huge. And again, as I said, we're working on this. We're receiving some help from international organizations. European Union allocated some amount of money. Countries like UK, US, and France, Turkey is our biggest partner in this case. Turkey is helping us with expertise and with technical, software expertise, and there's a specific word. I'm talking to you, Irina. We can cut this, please. But they're helping us with expertise, and they're helping us with machines, specific machines. I don't know how they're called, but they're helping us with equipment. Yes, this is the word I'm looking for. They're helping with equipment to do the landmine clearance. I'm in Turkey, but we're also getting money from, as I said, we got money from UK, from France, from European Union. United States gave us marshal dogs, 12 marshal dogs that are also helping with the landmines. But it's a huge issue, so I can talk about it for a long, long time. So demining is another issue. Reconstruction, demining is a big issue for Azerbaijan. Also resettlement, the repopulation of those territories that are being liberated. The first inhabitants already went to the Aghali village in Zangilan district. So it's a very important milestone for us because it's the first time that we resettled the liberated areas. There is a smart city that is built in Aghali village of Zangilan district. And it's kind of a pilot project, but it's rather successful because people are already living there and kids are going to schools, for example. So, but again, this is just a one population area that is already resettled. We have to build from scratch a huge area and clear them from landmines and repopulate them. So that's our challenge, internal challenge. And we, of course, hope for the help of our partners and friends in this regard. When it comes to other issues that is dealing with involving also Armenia's perspective, I spoke about peace treaty, signing of the peace treaty, peace process, which is rather complicated. I don't know how much you have been following this, but there were some promises that the peace treaty could be signed. And in the beginning of 2022, Azerbaijan proposed to Armenia a proposal, 5-point proposal, on the basis of which the potential peace treaty could be signed. And those proposals mainly spoke about the territorial integrity of states, respect for sovereignty of states, and refraining from the use of force, threat of use of force towards states, each other's, let's say Armenia and Azerbaijan, opening of all communications, a very basic, a very important principles, which actually have been taken from the, let's say, norms and principles of international law. So nothing really new. We didn't reinvent the legal in this regard. And the important thing is that Armenia, first of all, agreed. They accepted our proposals. And later on, when the peace process started, was the mediation of the European Union. There were really hopes that something actually could be done here. And there were already 3 meetings in Brussels format, with the mediation of the EU Council President Charles Michel, which Azerbaijan values highly. And we think that it's very important format and brings important results. And also there was a proposal to sign the peace treaty by the end of this year. And when the meeting in Prague happened in October, early October, the first time the ministers of foreign affairs of Armenia and Azerbaijan, they agreed to start working on the draft document of the peace treaty. So, which was actually unprecedented. Something like that never happened, that the 2 countries will start working on the draft document of the peace treaty, but it happened in Prague. But unfortunately, no, after that, there was also another meeting in early October, when a European political summit happened. And on the margins of this summit, there was another meeting between the leaders of Azerbaijan, President Aliyev and Nikol Pashinyan and Charles Michel, as well as French President Emmanuel Macron. And there was a final statement of this meeting. And in that final statement, also, there was a call for the parties to work on the peace treaty. So in October, there were rather important steps taken towards signing of the peace treaty. And there were also speculations about whether there are 2 drafts of the peace treaty. Some call it the Washington draft of the peace treaty. Others speak about the Russian draft of the peace treaty. There's some controversies in this regard. But the problem here is that Armenia's position keeps changing. And at some point, we had the understanding that the meetings that we were having in the Brussels format, actually, yes, it's very useful, it's very helpful, and we find it very, let's say, target-oriented and bringing results. But we also had an understanding that Armenia also thinks so, because after the meetings of the Brussels format, they were giving, I would say, hopeful statements which actually gave a food for thought for us to think that, well, maybe peace treaty could be not so far away. But these controversial statements coming from Armenia's leadership actually kind of dashes most of the hopes that the peace treaty could be signed in a very short time period. So they had to be another meeting in the within the Brussels format in early December, and they also had to be another meeting in Moscow, again between the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia. And the problem was that Armenia rejected to join both of these meetings. The first meeting didn't take place because Armenia didn't want to join if French President Emmanuel Macron wouldn't join. And the Azerbaijani problem was that we don't want to have more actors in this trilateral format, which is Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the European Union. And if you keep adding more actors, then it's not going to be a trilateral format. And also, given the position of France recently with regards to this conflict and how the statements made by President Emmanuel Macron actually frustrated Azerbaijani side, where he openly and clearly supported Armenia, and especially after the meeting in Prague, where he also participated, where there were also calls on the parties to sign peace treaty. There were also a decision to send EU monitoring mission to Armenia's border. Well, there were some important outcomes in Prague meeting where Emmanuel Macron also took place. But after that particular meeting, he makes a very controversial and openly hostile comments towards Azerbaijan. So therefore, Azerbaijan says, hey, wait a minute, we can't really have this negotiation format where a president of a country will also join, who has just, a couple of weeks ago spoke against us. So let's just keep it as it is. US, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and European Union, but Armenia rejected to come to the meeting without French participation, which actually that makes no sense. So therefore, the December meeting, early December meeting, it had to happen 7th of December. It didn't happen. And they also had to join, as I said, the meeting in Moscow. They also rejected to join that meeting either. So Azerbaijani foreign minister and Russian foreign minister, they met bilaterally. They had bilateral meeting, but Armenian foreign minister didn't join. So in a nutshell, I spoke a lot, I know. But in a nutshell, there were hopes that by the end of this year, a peace treaty could be signed. It didn't happen. And we don't know whether it's going to happen anytime soon because of Armenia's position, unfortunately. And when it comes to the draft of the peace treaty itself, well, again, as I said, there are speculations that there are two documents, Washington document, the Russian document, but there is no such thing according to our understanding. There are simply the approaches to the how the peace treaty should be signed. For example, in Washington approach, for instance, which Armenians probably, I don't know if they like or they don't like, but in that particular document, it says that Karabakh and all the surrounding areas are Azerbaijani territory, which is according to international law. While according to Russian approach, they would like to keep the issue of so-called status of the Karabakh, of the Nagorno-Karabakh, of Karabakh for a later stage. For instance, something like that, which Azerbaijan doesn't want because we think that the issue of status is not valid anymore. It's done. We don't grant. We don't want to grant. We don't think that this should be a topic of discussion anymore because issue of status is already solved when the war was over and when Azerbaijan regained its territories back by military force. So the status issue was being discussed, yes, in the negotiation format under the auspices of the OSCE, but Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. But provided that our territories had to be given back to us peacefully. But now that war had to happen, we don't want to discuss anything related to any specific status to so-called Nagorno-Karabakh, which doesn't exist anymore because we have dissolved the so-called Nagorno-Karabakh entity within Azerbaijan. We only have Karabakh and East Zangezur administrative units in our territory. We don't have Nagorno-Karabakh anymore, so-called. It's only in the historical context that we talk about it. That also should be clear that in Azerbaijan we don't have the Nagorno-Karabakh unit, autonomous entity, whatever you name it anymore. So it has been dissolved this year, 2021, the 21st July. I think it was this year, but just cut this part. It has been dissolved. You can say this. So another issue, opening of communications, which is again lots of things to discuss about that. If you look at the trilateral declaration, Article 9 of the declaration says that all the communications has to be open for unobstructed movement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which means they shouldn't be, doesn't consider any checkpoints or customs unit or whatever in those areas. Yes. So, but the problem was that is Armenia didn't, from the very beginning, they didn't like the idea of having corridor. While this particular idea was enshrined in the November Declaration, that there has to be some kind of unobstructed movement of goods and people along that area that is united around Mehri, region of Mehri, that is uniting Armenia and Azerbaijan. We call it Zengezur Corridor because the historical name of that area. Well, maybe they don't like the name, maybe they don't like the idea of corridor, but it's all the matter of semantics, we call it corridor, you can call them a road, or I don't know, whatever. Just it's again the matter of choice of words. But I think it's not the matter of the words. I think it's a matter of with Armenia not really wanting to open this corridor, Zangezur corridor. It's very difficult to understand, because if all the communications open in the region, also, particularly between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it means Armenia will end its isolation, because it has been in isolation for the duration of about 3 decades while this occupation continued. It has been left out from all the regional infrastructure energy projects. And if all this communication open, I mean, it's for sure that they are getting an opportunity to end this economic isolation and benefit from all these things that are happening, all these projects that are happening in the region. But the problem Armenia with that is there are lots of revanchist forces in the country, which actually dragging the progress. They still believe and think that they can reverse the flow of events. They can still regain the territories. And they still believe that having some sort of peace with Azerbaijan will be betrayal. Again, which is a kind of thinking that is actually slowing the progress of the country and depriving the nation of its future. Because when you look at the Armenia's economic condition and predicament, the only, let's say, lifeline they're having is their dependency on Russia on many respects. But if they would like to be really economically and independent and viable, they have to cooperate with their neighbors, particularly with Azerbaijan. And opening of all this communication actually give this very chance to Armenia. But they are still against the Zangezur corridor, and by doing so, they are violating their own commitments under the November Declaration, unfortunately. And at some point, as I mentioned earlier, they spoke about checkpoints, and they spoke about, I don't know, customs, establishing a customs regime in Zangezur corridor. Again, it very clearly says in the November Declaration that they should be unobstructed movement along this area, which should be guarded by Russian FSB. Yeah, so it's still it's something that is Armenia also signed itself. So we are having problems with the implementation of Article 9 on opening of all communication, and we are also having problems trying to understand why Armenia is still blocking very particular article of the November Declaration, which is actually beneficial most of all to Armenia itself. So it is still being under consideration and discussion. And there's another issue currently I forgot to mention in the beginning when I mentioned the cluster of issues that is under discussion. The border delimitation and demarcation process, which is also a huge process. And there have been also a couple of meetings of border commission trying to work out how and where, based on which maps, the border delimitation and demarcation happens between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So there isn't really much progress on that cluster, obviously. The last meeting happened in early November, and there was an agreement that this process should continue. And well, probably the next meeting will also happen in some time. But as I said, unfortunately, Armenia rejected to join the meetings in December, early December in Brussels and later in Moscow. So we don't know how Armenia is going to behave towards the meetings of the Border Delimitation Commission. So what their position will be. So we're kind of watching them, what's going to happen. But that's also an important topic under discussion. Humanitarian issue, I spoke about landmines, but I also want to quickly mention that one of the issue, I would say it's a contentious issue. I would say it's something that Armenia is trying to pressure Azerbaijan on, but it's not really useful. It's to no avail, because they were trying to kind of manipulate was the issue of the prisoners of war towards Azerbaijan, saying that, well, Azerbaijan is keeping those prisoners of war, and there are lots of articles and disinformation that they are writing about how Azerbaijan, quote unquote, mistreating Armenian prisoners. For once, I just want to make it clear that, and Azerbaijan said it many times, that we don't have prisoners of war. All those prisoners of war that Azerbaijan had were returned by the time we signed the November Declaration. And the problem now is that Armenia was using the Lachin road. I spoke a little bit about the Lachin road earlier and how it used to pass through the Lachin city, uniting Armenia proper and Karabakh. Armenia was using this particular Lachin road to smuggle in illegal, illegal goods, and also illegal transfers of weapons, landmines, as well as militias who were coming to Azerbaijani territories, liberated territories, and to carry out terrorist sabotage activities. And as a response to that, Azerbaijani forces, armed forces, conducted a couple of times special operations in order to avert these activities that the militias coming from Armenia proper were trying to conduct in Azerbaijani territories. And they detained those people. And the prisoners, the so-called quote-unquote prisoners of war that Armenians are actively referring to are actually those detainees who came to Azerbaijani territories using Lachin road, which is specifically had to be used only for humanitarian purposes and civilian purposes. They used Lachin road for different kinds of illegal purposes, came to Azerbaijani territories. We had to conduct these operations and detain them. And those detainees, they are portraying as prisoners of war. And as again, as a gesture of goodwill and in exchange of the landmine maps, Azerbaijani side several times returned dozens of detainees to Armenia, although we didn't have to, because those are considered to be terrorists that are conducting illegal and disruptive deeds in Azerbaijani territories. But we returned them because we wanted to get those landmine maps, and which unfortunately were only 25% accurate, but we still return them. So there are no prisoners of war in Azerbaijan. There are only some criminals that Azerbaijani forces had to capture in the purposes of self-defense, obviously. And we also returned over 1,700 bodies of military servicemen to Armenia after the war was over. But there are about 4,000 Azerbaijanis missing since the first Karabakh war, since the mid-90s. and we still don't know the whereabouts of these people. Although Armenia promised to return the remnants of 138 people in the beginning, and then they said that we're going to return 10 more people, but we still don't know where these, the rest of the people are. 4,000 people are still missing from Azerbaijani side, and we don't know where they are since the early 90s. Can you imagine? So we managed to return 17,000 Armenians right after the Second Karabakh War in 2020 was over, but they still don't report to us what happened to these 4,000 Azerbaijanis since the early 90s. So, at some point, you realize that you're making all these concessions from your side, which is mostly one-sided, unfortunately, and we're not getting reciprocation. Because, if we want to achieve some peace and understanding, which we are trying, we are the party who won the war, but we are taking all sorts of initiatives and all sorts of good gestures towards Armenia to have peace, to sign a peace treaty. I mean, this is unprecedented in history that the party which has came victorious from the war is taking all those initiatives to sign a peace treaty, to integrate, actually to have some relationship with the party that actually lost the war. But it is not reciprocated from Armenia. And that's very, very disappointing. And we keep hoping that their behavior will change at some point, because, the peace in the South Caucasus has to come at some point. People are tired of war. So that's that. And if you ask me about what's happening currently around Lachin Road and the current situation, I spoke a little bit about it, because the Lachin Road originally is considered, and it has always been considered to be for only civilian and humanitarian purposes. But we keep getting the reports that Armenian side is using this corridor for different sorts of illegal activities, for all sorts of smuggling, for all sorts of illegal trafficking, bringing in landmines and mining our territories, and bringing in militias, as I spoke about just recently, and they call them prisoners of war after we capture them. And most importantly, they are exploiting and abusing our natural resources and smuggling them through the Lachin Road and selling them, which is a huge illegal deed, and it is obviously the destruction of our natural habitat, and again, it's illegal under international law. There are two areas, Demir Bulaq and, there are two areas, Kızıl Bulaq and Demirli, in those areas currently, that were being exploited by Armenian side, and foreign company called Base Metal, which was also involved in these illegal activities. And they were, again, as I said, exploiting our gold deposit, because Demir Bulaq is gold deposit, and I keep saying it wrong. Kızıl Bulaq is gold deposit, and Demirli is a mineral deposit. And both of these deposits were being used and exploited. And our environmentalist activists, they just wanted to conduct some sort of monitoring there. But previously, when this whole situation happened around this peaceful demonstration of environmentalists, there was an agreement that a delegation from Azerbaijani government agencies would go there, of course, with the help and with the accommodation of Russian peacekeepers. They would go there and conduct some sort of monitoring. But unfortunately, the local Armenian administration, quote unquote, after Vardanyan came there, they kind of staged up some sort of protest or whatever. They created the obstruction towards the agreed monitoring of these deposits by our governmental agencies. So this agreement to conduct some sort of monitoring didn't happen because there was a resistance from internal resistance, created artificially by Vardanyan and his followers. I would say it like
And
that.
could you
I'll
tell
come
us
to Vardanyan.
a little
Yeah.
bit about who Vardanyan is for the audience who's not familiar with that
Yeah,
story?
Rubin Vardanyan, he is a Russian oligarch, and he came to recently to Karabakh, and he used to have Russian citizenship, but he recently rejected from his citizenship, and he kind of came to Karabakh to become some sort of state minister, whatever, I don't know the name that they they want to name themselves. But the idea of him coming to Karabakh is very plain and simple. You know, Azerbaijan says, and we have been taking active steps towards contacting with Armenians residing in Karabakh. And they were also first contacts and rather successful contacts with Armenians residing in Karabakh and Azerbaijani side. And I think some forces were really very unhappy with the fact that Azerbaijan is already contacting its residents, citizens in Karabakh, and these contacts are very successful. So they got scared from the prospects of this. So what's going to happen if Azerbaijan succeeds in reintegrating these people, which will happen anyway? But if Azerbaijan does it quickly and soon, then the only alternative for Russian peacekeepers, for example, in Karabakh, is to leave. And the only alternative for Armenian nationalists and revanchists is to forego their ideology once and forever. So this was rather dangerous. And they sent this person from Moscow to kind of debilitate and to inhibit the entire process. And he came and he started his rather unconstructive policies, quote unquote. And one of them was this, you know, creating some staged up resistance towards the monitoring of the Azerbaijan's natural reserves by the governmental forces. And he's making all these provocative statements. So even now, everybody, Armenian lobby around the world, and you know, the Armenian people or politicians or journalists that are having Armenian bias, which is quite a lot around the world, they keep saying that Lachin Road is now currently blocked, which is not the case. And we cannot stress this enough. It is not blocked. All, you know, there are lots of videos over the internet you can find in Google, the cars, the emergency cars, even humanitarian convoys, everything that is serving civilian purposes, they can freely pass through this road. Nothing is blocked. The only thing that is blocked is that Azerbaijani environmentalists preventing from illegal smuggling of our natural resources that are illegally being exploited and taken out of Azerbaijan through the Lachin Road. But other than that, it is open for all civilian and humanitarian purposes, which is actually the main idea of the Lachin Road, to keep it open for humanitarian purposes. So even now that the road is not closed, Vardanyan keeps saying that it is closed, and he is preventing people residing there from using this corridor, from using this road, Lachin Road. So he is rather acting rather let's say, destructive ways in this situation. And he hopes that they can revive the so-called Miatsum and all this, some sort of radical ideology, and prevent Azerbaijan's contact and Azerbaijan's plans to integrate Karabakh Armenians to its society, again, which is going to happen sooner or later. But that's the situation currently. And as I said, I keep repeating myself, Lachin Road currently is not blocked. Environmentalists are standing there for over 2 weeks now. The only demand they have is to go through. They're not being let by Russian peacekeepers. They want to go inside the Karabakh area. They want to see what is happening in this Kızılbudak and Demirli deposits, gold and mineral deposits, but they're not being let. And they're using their right to peaceful protests. That's what is happening. and road is not blocked. It is open for all humanitarian purposes. So please, don't believe this propaganda which says that people are starving or road is blocked. It is not the case.
And what is the relationship between Vardanyan and these Russian peacekeepers? Aren't they abusing their authority by blocking civilians from entering? Isn't their role to prevent violence and to coordinate passage rather than arbitrarily prevent civilian protesters?
Uh, can I get the question again, Irina?
The role of is there a relationship between Vardanyan and those Russian peacekeepers, and what's the extent of their authority on preventing civilians from entering? Aren't they supposed to be just there to prevent violence from breaking out?
Vardanyan was sent there by certain forces, and I mean he was definitely sent there by with the purposes, as I said, to prevent Azerbaijan's contacts with Armenians in Karabakh. But what kind of relations they have with Russian peacekeepers, I don't know honestly. But the Russian peacekeepers, they have to fulfill their duties, and the reason I don't understand why they're not letting our people to get into our own territories just to see what is happening in those deposits. They're not giving any reasons. And they have to be reminded, and we keep saying this to them, that this is your temporary deployment. You're not controlling our territories. You are here temporarily deployed, and you can't prevent our citizens from going inside our own territory. But what kind of dynamics they have with Vardanyan and Russian peacekeepers amongst themselves, I can't tell you this. But from our side, I just stress that we're not happy with the way Russian peacekeepers are also conducting this. Because again, they had to let our people go in, and they have no reasons to block the road. They had no reasons to prevent our people to go inside our own territories.
I'll come back to the issue of illegal mining momentarily, but before that, I just wanted to ask an additional question about these campaigns, claiming, first of all, as you mentioned, that the roads are closed, which they aren't, and the second issue that appears very frequently in the international media, including in the United States, is that supposedly Azerbaijan cut off gas, preventing Armenians from benefiting from this gas, and they're dependent on it. What exactly is going on with that?
Actually, as I said, there's lots of misinformation, and this is one of them. Gas to Karabakh goes from Armenia. It doesn't go from Azerbaijan. How can we cut something that we don't provide? Yeah. So it goes through Armenia. Probably, I believe it is the case, it goes through the Lachin road. But if we haven't done anything actively to cut it, how can it be cut? Again, as I said, there are peaceful people standing there in cold weather, in snowy weather, in freezing temperatures. They're not doing anything. They're unarmed people. How can they cut the gas? I mean, it's mind-boggling how can actually someone can make such claims, because we're not providing gas to Karabakh. How can we cut it? So again, I think it's not I think, but this is again propaganda directed against Azerbaijan, because once again Azerbaijan is demanding that its territories and sovereignty is being respected. And we have seen lots of cases where Armenian propagandists don't like when Azerbaijan demands that its sovereignty and territorial integrity respects. We have it being respected. So we have seen it for 30 years. All this propaganda against Azerbaijan, anti-Azerbaijani campaign. So it's just one of them. Again, we're not providing gas to Karabakh. We can't cut it.
So was the gas cut off at all? And if so, was it cut off by the Armenians themselves?
Could be. Maybe there wasn't even a cut anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it could be a provocation, but again, we're not providing gas to those places. How can we cut it? On
Mm-hmm.
the contrary, I don't know if how many of you know about it or remember this. In the beginning, after the war was over, after the 2020 November war was over, last year in 2021, Azerbaijan actually provided Armenia when there was a problem with gas provision by the Russian Federation to Armenia. Azerbaijan allowed gas provision through its territory to Armenia. So Azerbaijan allowed that Gazprom uses its infrastructure and provides gas to Armenia. Also, we transferred humanitarian aid to Karabakh Armenians through our own territory. It happened last year when there was a crisis, the gas crisis, and using our railroads going to Bardak, going to Karabakh, we allowed the usage of Gorus-Kafan highway for a long time. This Gorus-Kafan highway, when our territories were occupied, it was being used by Armenia because they were occupied. But after we liberated our lands, this Gorus-Kafan highway, which is uniting Armenia's middle Armenia and southern Armenia, it came to our control because it is our territory. But during Soviet times, this Gorus-Kafan highway was being used both by Armenia and Azerbaijan because it was Soviet times. But now, after the occupation, Armenia was using it because we didn't have control over it. But after we liberated, we actually let Armenia and the people that were living in those areas to use that road for a rather long time without any checkpoints, without any customs, anything. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is we have done quite lots of gestures of goodwill towards Armenia. And we're not seeing that reciprocated. And we're not cutting gas to Karabakh. Again, they're our citizens. And unfortunately, currently, we're not able to provide gas to them because infrastructure is not in place. They're getting gas from Armenia, and we cannot cut something that we're not controlling.
Before I get back to the issue of illegal mining, which is very interesting, there is one geopolitical parallel question I'd like to ask. Azerbaijan has been at the forefront of providing energy to Europe at the peak of the ongoing energy crisis, the Southern Gas Corridor, the pipeline that we're seeing in the Balkans that's providing energy to Greece and nearby countries, Bulgaria and so forth. It's quite ironic that this energy issue is now rising up, these accusations about gas being cut off, even as Azerbaijan's importance as a gas provider is rising in Europe. And I'm wondering whether that is a coincidence. And the other issue I'm wondering about, parallel to these recent developments and these tensions, we are seeing tensions rising between Serbia and Kosovo, with Serbia militarizing heavily, and there are accusations of tensions and a potential for attack, and so on and so forth. Do you think all these things that are happening are entirely independent of each other, or do you think there is some broader effort to manipulate optics and to manipulate these territorial issues and disputes towards some larger goal?
The issue connection with Azerbaijan's energy relationship and partnerships, and kind of Azerbaijan's so-called quote-unquote policies towards Karabakh has always been manipulated by Armenia. And this is not something new. Unfortunately, anytime they want to make a point, they always come to a place where they blame Azerbaijan for being able to build successful energy partnerships, which doesn't make sense because, if we have managed to build this successful partnership, we're not the only ones who are benefiting from this. And it is clear that Azerbaijan is contributing greatly to the energy security of its neighbors, energy security also to European continent to some degree. And it's now clear that this importance is even rising more, given the European Union's desire and let's say European Union's search for more outside alternative sources of gas and energy in the view of what is happening between Russia and Ukraine. And as there's a new memorandum of understanding that was signed between Azerbaijan and the European Union in July this year, which envisages doubling of the volumes that Azerbaijan provides to Europe, which will reach around 20,000 BCM by 2027. That is the reported number, but actual number could actually be more. And also, currently, Azerbaijan and the European Union and the countries like Georgia, Hungary, and Romania are working on the Black Sea transmission cable, through which they're going to transmit electricity that is received from the renewable sources. And Azerbaijan is also expanding its renewable energy potential to use for domestic purposes, but not only that, also to export this renewable energy-based electricity to Europe. You know, in Europe, in most of the cases now, electricity is also gas-based, right? If you are also getting electricity from renewable sources, you are saving gas. And it's a huge contribution to Europe's energy security, as I said. So again, this energy partnership that Azerbaijan has built took not 1 year, it took many years, and it took lots of efforts and lots of coordination, lots of trust, and lots of stability and mutual confidence in partnerships. And seeing that being jeopardized, quote unquote, not jeopardized, they can't jeopardize it, but seeing that being attacked by let's say Armenian propagandists when they want to make a point is actually rather ridiculous. But there is a tendency which we have seen that anytime there is something important that is happening on the energy front, Armenia would like to sabotage it. If you remember the attacks against Tovuz in July of 2020, that actually happened right before the Southern Gas Corridor had to be commissioned finally. And it actually happened very far from Karabakh area. So Tovuz is actually far from Karabakh. It's on the northern part, and it is not really nearby to Karabakh. But they attacked Tovuz, which is situated near the oil and gas infrastructure that is passing through Azerbaijan to Ganja city, and from there to Georgia and to European markets. So the timing and the location of the attack was chosen, and immediately the experts and energy experts and everyone was like, well, is it happening because Azerbaijan is already ready, closer to the commissioning and completion of the Southern Gas Corridor? Well, probably one of the reasons was that. And this manipulations about Azerbaijan's energy and the so-called, attacks, blah, blah. It is also happening in the context of now Azerbaijan signing two important documents with the European Union. First of them is Memorandum of Understanding signed in July this year with the European Union to double the gas exports to European Union by 2027 up to 20 BCM. Another one, which was signed in this December, just a couple of weeks ago, on the development of Black Sea transmission cable between European Union, Georgia, Hungary, and Romania. Now this time to transport electricity through the submarine cables under the Black Sea based on renewable energy. So these two important developments are happening in Azerbaijan energy partnerships. And we are having all these arguments about, Azerbaijan doing this or that. So yes, there is a tendency and huge desire to sabotage Azerbaijan's successful energy partnerships, and it is not going to happen.
And the other part of that is, do you believe that the ongoing tensions, rising tensions between Kosovo and Serbia are now also reflecting the same dynamic? Do you think it's a coincidence that at the same time that there is this war in Ukraine that is not going particularly well for Russia, at the same time as Europe is scrambling to find alternative energy sources successfully in some cases, you are seeing two parts of the world having the two conflicts rising up out of the blue, despite being on track to a more peaceful, transition in past years?
The desire and tendency on the part of Armenian revanchists to sabotage and create problems has been happening for some time now. So I wouldn't particularly connect it to anything that is happening between Kosovo and Serbia, although there was a desire on the part of Armenian nationalists previously to kind of bring in the Kosovo scenario to so-called Karabakh solution. I mean, it was past in the history. And when they were talking about this so-called remedial secession based on human rights, which actually didn't apply because nothing like that is similar to Karabakh. I mean, it's very two complete different cases, what happened in Kosovo and what was happening in Karabakh. So there was the desire to unite these two and draw parallels on the part of Armenian diaspora has always been there, which was often and always debunked by Azerbaijan. But currently, and not only by Azerbaijan, by the way, by also lawyers, also by international lawyers. So there is no parallels between the two cases. But currently, if it's having any impact, I can't really confirm that, because as I mentioned previously, also this conflict has been brewing for some time. Not the conflict, but the current situation has been brewing for some time, and we have been given warnings to to these forces there, to Armenia, that you should stop doing this. You should stop exploiting our natural resources. You should stop wreaking havoc with our environment. You should stop using Lachin Road for the purposes other than humanitarian. So these messages were being sent on many occasions, and one of the reasons also why Azerbaijan is also unhappy, both with the fulfillment, with how the Russian peacekeepers are fulfilling their tasks, also how Armenia is implementing its commitments, is that Article 4 of the November Declaration clearly says that after the war is over, there shouldn't be left any single Armenian militias, Armenian forces in the liberated Azerbaijani land. But by now, by today, we are still witnessing the cases when there are Armenian militias, military formations are still remaining in the Azerbaijani territories, in the liberated lands, in those areas which are now currently temporarily controlled, temporarily under, let's say, supervision of the Russian peacekeepers. And one of the reasons is that they are using Lachin Road to come to Azerbaijani territory. The Lachin Road is being exploited for the purposes other than it is being designed and considered. So again, we have been giving warnings for a long time, but we had, our environmentalists again had to take action. It's their right. It's their sovereign right to demand, to see what is happening in those territories in terms of the exploitation of our natural resources, to demand that the Lachin Road is not being used for any other purposes other than humanitarian purposes. And unfortunately, Lachin Road, as I spoke a lot in the earlier, I don't want to repeat here, is being used for military purposes as well. So it's been brewing for some time.
Getting back to the illegal mining, who exactly is doing this? What kind of damage, environmental impact is it having? And where is the produce, the gold, the minerals, and whatever, where is it headed after they excavate it?
Well, it's been exploited by Armenia and its imposters. And currently, I'm also saying the person that is there, who is Vardanyan, it's being exploited by foreign companies. Base Metal is one such company, which was involved for some time, still was doing it. Gızılbular and Demirli gold and mineral deposits. And they exploit these resources. They smuggle them through Lachin Road, and they take them, take them out to the world, wherever they can sell them. So I mean, that's the scheme. I mean, they smuggle it. It's illegal. So you know what happens to illegal goods. So they just sell it wherever they can sell it, and for the best money they can get. But the bottom line is, our resources are being exploited illegally, and we have every right to demand that it's being stopped. So that's what is happening. That's the baseline.
Is there any legal action that can be taken against the companies involved in these schemes?
Yes, they are, and our government is working on it.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Meanwhile, we are seeing that this situation is creating tensions not only in terms of the observers, but the very fact of having foreigners exploiting mining that should be under the control of the government. Do you think, and that's the question on everyone's mind, there's a potential for military excavation if the situation continues, and what would it take for that to happen? At what point does the government say enough is enough, we're just going to kick them out?
You know, I can't tell you this. I don't know if and when that's going to happen, and I hope that it won't reach that point. I truly hope and believe that it won't reach that point because everyone should be aware. I think they are aware of the fact that Azerbaijan takes this very seriously, and it's not only Azerbaijani government, you know, saying it and doing it. It's our people that are tired of it. The problem is the narrative is that they just say that, well, this is something that is staged up by Azerbaijani government. But again, the problem with this narrative is that they always underestimate what the people think and the value the people put into their own lands and into their own belongings. And I think that was also the mistake that many observers made when Azerbaijan won the Second Karabakh War, 44-day war. Because, under those conditions that Azerbaijan won the war, it wasn't only about, military prowess and military success and military, I don't know, superiority. It was also about Azerbaijani people being fed up that their territories are under occupation. It was also our people that liberated those lands. It was also the valor of our soldiers who actually liberated our lands. And we have to give credit to what people think, to what people want. And this is one of the cases where people are fed up with the fact that their territories and their resources are being illegally exploited. And that should be the focus of any talk of the current situation.
Well, here's hoping that it will be resolved peacefully and that some of this information can finally get out and counter the propaganda. There's been numerous articles written by Armenian lobbyists and assorted other people about the situation entirely one-sided. I am hoping that Azerbaijani analysts can start putting out responses into international press as well, because any situation deserves at the very least both sides speaking about it and not just one.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that's very important that international media portals are not one-sided. Unfortunately, we are seeing that on many occasions when Azerbaijani perspective is simply being refused to be put out there, while they simply put and publish anything that Armenian perspective has to offer. I hope that changes.
Well, that's certainly disturbing to think about, that simply rejecting one side in a major conflict, because by doing that the media takes part in the conflict. They stop being objective arbiter of information and they become political activists taking sides, and that's not acceptable if media is to maintain its credibility.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for this vital information. This has been going on for a couple of weeks now, and it's, I kept hoping that it would just get resolved quickly, and then there would be no need for any further discussions, but that's not the case. The situation is ongoing, and I think it's very important to inform the public about Azerbaijani perspective and generally give more information about the background to what they're hearing on the news. It's very often propaganda makes complicated things seem very simple and the other way around.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for this opportunity to convey Azerbaijani perspective, which I completely agree with you that often unfortunately in the West in media portals, which is rather difficult to get through. So therefore, I want to thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year to everyone who joined the program. This was the first program for the year, and I hope to have many more interesting, informative discussions, and hopefully seeing a resolution to past issues that we've commented on here. This was Dr. Esmira Jafarova from the Air Center in Azerbaijan, and we will see you again same time, 9 p.m. next week, Tuesday, on the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition.